Welcome back, everybody, and welcome again to Bootstrap Solo. I am your host, Pratik Shah, and today we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly about running your own practice. This podcast is for those that want to know what it's really like to start, run, and grow a practice. Today's guest is my good friend, Arash Khorsandi. He runs a 75-person practice that focuses on personal injury. He started his practice back in 2009, has been growing strong ever since. Arash, thank you for joining the
Thank you
pod.
for
How are
having
you?
me. Great, man. Thank you for having me.
I mean, what a treat for me. I mean, 75 people, that's a lot of people to manage.
Well, let me tell you, bigger. I was talking to Teresa before. Bigger is not always better, and it's always a challenge. But we're blessed, and we're always looking for improvement and building and breaking. But yeah, especially now in the last 2 years, 3 years with COVID, it's definitely been an incredible journey. Lots of ups and downs, a lot of hurdles and challenges with management of humans all around, both in-house and clients and vendors and so on and so forth. But hey, we're here. We crank it through.
That's it. We wake up every day and try to do
That's it.
some good.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
So, it's interesting you mentioned about kind of transitioning through COVID because I remember when I was in my practice and COVID hit and everybody was transitioning to home. I had a meeting with the team and was just like, look, guys, we're going to do our best. There is no playbook on how to run your firm during a pandemic. Everybody's trying to figure it out as we go along. How did you handle that initial talk with your staff?
It's similar to what you're describing. You have to be flexible, and part of running any business, whether it's a law firm or a restaurant or whatever, you have to be nimble and flexible with the circumstances because truly you can never predict anything. So you got to have multiple contingency plans. So from my perspective, initially, I'll never forget when COVID, was breaking out, and people were like, "What is it? Is this is just a hoax? Is it not? Are we going to go?" And I remember sitting at my desk one day and I had talked to one of my buddies in New York who was in the finance field. And he's like, hey, shit's hitting the fan. Sorry, pardon my language. But, this is kind of getting crazy here. And immediately I went on to Amazon and I went and I bought 70 laptops. Okay. Immediately. I didn't even flinch because I'm like, if this is going to go down, we might have to actually go remote. And within a week and a half, these laptops started coming in, and then laptops started selling out everywhere, and you couldn't even get more laptops. So, anyways, you have to be nimble, and we were really playing it semi by ear because, like you said, there is no playbook for something like this. Nobody has, not the government, not anybody else. So you gotta really buckle up, and you gotta rely on your core team because your core team and the people that you have built with, the people that you have struggled with, the people that you have wrestled with for the last 10 years, however long it is, in your office that you consider your core, you got to rely on them and you got to listen to the people that are talking to you internally and be ready to make, moves and changes. And by the way, U-turns are allowed. You might make one decision and it may not be the right one at the time, and we've done it, and God knows how many times I've done it, and I continue to do it in the office. But U-turns are allowed, and it's okay if you identify a decision that was poor or maybe not the right time, and even if it's you as the jefe, but you got to make that call. And so we've done that several times through COVID with hybrid, with coming back, so on and so forth. But one, I think the most important thing that helped us throughout this process was we had such an incredible group of core people in this office, and everybody was participating in the process and brainstorming, and we were going by it. So it was really a collective decision and effort all throughout. And part of that, when you have people, participating in the decision making process in these circumstances, you also get some sort of buy-in, and people are buying into what their decisions are, for better or for worse, for at least a period of time. So we've gone through that like everybody else has, and then obviously we mandated a bunch of in-office testing twice a week. We brought a company in when we came back, and we still do it till today. Believe it or not, I think we're one of the few places that still it's not mandatory. But hey, every Monday and every Thursday after the weekend and before you go in, you're just like, hey, the nurse is here. You want to take advantage of it? It's free. Handle it. So even now, you get some upticks of COVID. You got to just deal with it.
You just got to deal with it. There's a couple things you mentioned I want to touch on.
Yeah.
The one thing that really stood out to me was U-turns are allowed. I love that saying. I mean, I've never heard that before, but I think that's beautiful because that's it, right? You're growing your practice. You started off with just you. You're up to 75, 13 years later. And there's no argument that during that 13 years, there's been decisions where you're like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Let's try something else. Can you tell us about maybe a particular decision
Sure. I mean,
that fell into that category?
yeah, absolutely. They're probably it's literally on the daily. I would say decisions like that because as a operator of again a law firm or any business, as an operator, you don't understand. I mean, you do understand, but you appreciate how many decisions you're making on an hourly, daily basis. So one thing that I'm big on is your decision tree or how you're making decisions or the speed of which you're making decisions and the speed of which you're recognizing the failure of some of those decisions and not letting your your own ego or someone else's get in the way of making that U-turn when a U-turn is necessary. Sometimes they're big decisions, sometimes they're small. So like I was saying before, your ego is not your amigo. You got to park that at the door, whether you're the operator or a manager or a litigation manager, whoever, and you got to be okay. So it's the frequency and the speed of which you catch those incorrect or mistimed decisions that helps you. And the more you do it, the faster and quicker you become at identifying them. And so literally we have I'm not even close to perfect. I make incorrect or mistimed decisions on the daily. Thankfully they're all small and it's insignificant, and it's more because I also move very fast, so I make decisions quickly on the fly a lot of times. And that's again after starting kind of from scratch in a in an interior office 13 years ago without windows in an executive suite. This is before there was Justice HQ and WeWork and all that. It was a you know executive suites, and I had to do everything myself. I had to set up the fax machine myself. I had to pick up the phones myself. I had to do literally all of it, and by doing that and going forward with it, you kind of learn all the little details and how much time it goes into just the simplest things. So, uh, part of that is really just being comfortable with making some U-turns.
Right. So
Yeah.
let's go back to that executive office. I want to hear a lot
Yeah.
about that. Back in 2009, we talked a little bit about this, that a lot of times there is a misconception out there that people start their practice and they either become successful right away or they never make it. But I think that's just not reality. Obviously, you started like a lot of folks, small office, just you, solo. You had been practicing for how long before you started your own practicing?
About 2.5 years. I was at a very good firm with one of my mentors now, and I had left. It was a PI firm, and I had left not because I was going to start my own practice or do PI. I had left because I wanted to do real estate finance and just get out of the field of law entirely. I had zero, zero, zero expectation or desire to do what I'm doing today. And even in law school, all my friends that know me in law school, they're like, "You're in the last place that we ever thought you would be." Because I would always be like, "Guys, we're not going to be litigating. Stop. Why are we going to the evidence class? Why are we doing this?" Why? And here we are. But when I had first started, when I had left, I wanted to do real estate finance, not even law or anything like that. And of course, in 2009, the markets were so just horrific
Yeah, not a
and
great time for
crazy.
real estate.
Not at all. But I didn't know any better. I was just like, okay, let's just do it. And I was forced to eventually, after not being able to crack into the real estate world and failing at that, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm like, okay, I know PI pretty well. I'm pretty young. I liked it. I was burnt out as hell, but I was like, okay. So I went back to my former boss and I sat down with him and I kind of explained it to him, and he gave me his like absolute, hey, go for it. You're gonna do great. Blah blah blah. I'll never forget. He even at the time, offered me financial help, and I was just like so blown away by it, which was very nice. But I started, and I was like, okay, I didn't have a single client, and I had an option when I was getting my office space. And here's kind of the important parts. When I was getting my office space, I remember walking through with the leasing lady and showing me like, here's this executive suite, and here's this executive suite, and we got this one. It's got corner, and it's got windows, and blah blah blah, and this one, and this and that. And she showed me just like the one of them on the side was literally the size of a janitor's closet with no windows, right? And she's like, oh, and that one she's walking by, I'm like, no, no, let me see that one. And she's like, no,
Yeah.
no, you don't want that one. Like that's like you're gonna be depressed and kill yourself in there. Like nobody wants that. And I said, no, 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 I want that one. I don't freaking deserve that window
Right.
corner office in Century City, blah blah blah. And the difference of rent was probably the time. I remember my first lease was like $650 a month versus 980 or $1,000 for the window
Yeah.
office. Percentage wise, that's a
Right.
huge percentage,
Oh,
right?
and in the beginning, every penny counts.
Every penny counts. And it was like, okay, I could spend another $400 a month and get this blah, blah. I'm like, I don't freaking deserve it. What have I done? I haven't done shit. I don't have a
Right.
client. I have nothing. So I got the interior office, and you know, one of the most important things that I see today with this new, I don't want to call it generation because I still consider myself very young, so I'm part of this young generation.
Yeah.
But part of what I see today in 2022 that is, I think, one of the biggest hurdles that people are having is the power of showing up physically and
Yeah.
mentally. Okay, but there is a physical component of physically showing up. You know, when I started, I forced myself, no matter what. I had no clients. I literally had zero, nothing. Okay,
Yeah.
I forced myself to get behind my desk by 8 a.m. I was
Yeah.
behind my desk and I sat down, I turned on my laptop, I had my phone, and I sat in this room and I looked it around. There was not even artwork on there. It was literally like an insane asylum. The lady was right, you know? But I showed
Yeah.
up. I drank my
Yeah.
coffee. At the time, I think it was MySpace. And I would go on MySpace a little bit. I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was by showing up every morning super early, okay, and I was not a morning person at all, by showing up early in the mornings, I was forced to find things to do. And I
Yeah.
was always chasing things to do. Whereas on the days that I realized I would show up at 9, 9:15, 9:30, I was no longer chasing things to do. I was just reacting to the day. And I was
Mhm.
just being reactionary. And when you're
Mhm.
starting, and even now, but even more importantly, when I was starting and we were not, figuring out how to even get a single case through the door, you have to show up so you can be proactive and get ahead of the game, get ahead of the day. Otherwise, the day will wash you out,
Mhm.
and you'll go through the cycle for months and months and months and months. And you're like, wait, why am I not advancing at the pace that I want? Right? And then you're like, shoot, I got to figure something out. So the power of showing up physically. Okay. Now I get it. We're in 2022, remote, and people want to work from home and do all that. You can still accomplish that.
Exactly.
You
But
know,
yeah, exactly. I think it's a difference of being on offense versus defense.
right?
And in the
Exactly.
beginning, it's got to be you. If you show up and you're, especially when you're not a morning person, and you show up, I did that too. I would show up 8 a.m. I would be at my desk, and if it was 8:01, I'd be upset with myself because
Yep.
I'm the boss. I can get here at 8 a.m. Why can't I get here? And once I'm there, even if I have nothing to work on, you start thinking, well, I got up early, I got ready, and I got here. I better be productive, otherwise that was a waste.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way of putting it. That's exactly right. And it also starts to build discipline. It's like working out or something else. Clearly, I don't
Mhm.
work out anymore. But it's about building that discipline. And part of the interior office versus the exterior office analogy and example that I went through was hunger. You got to stay hungry. So you are the only person that controls your own destiny in terms of controlling your level of hunger, right? So you control that level of hunger. Nobody else. Yeah, there's outside variables and factors, but you control that and you can contribute to that. And for me, it was like, I don't deserve X. So, which was the exterior office. keeping that interior office small, tight, gloomy was kind of my own torturous way of really doubling down on the hunger. Yes, I was actually
Yeah.
hungry, but it was
Yeah.
really like I'm going to work my ass off to get out of this space fast,
Right.
and
I don't want to be
double
here.
time. I don't want
Yeah.
to be here, and I don't want to get comfortable here. And
Right.
getting comfortable is part of losing that hunger. So even now, 13 years later, Pratik, it's, there's a challenge always. I'm older, I have kids now, there's other priorities and responsibilities, but I always have to find ways to, create that hunger, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, that journey from '09 internal office to 2022, 75 people. And I've been on your website. I know what your firm does. You and I know each other. And I know the millions of dollars in settlements and verdicts and victories that you've gotten. There's a great story in there. So I want to start in 2009, internal office. Obviously, your first case out the gate that you settled was not a seven-figure case.
Not even
Fair?
close. Not even close. Yeah, fair is right. I was the king of Prop 213s, That's what it was. So
Yeah.
in 2009, I was still not in the game of PI yet, but I knew that's where I wanted to go. But I also knew that I needed some money to get there because even back then, obviously different landscape than today, but similar. Even back then, you needed capital or at least some capital to compete with, the marketing that it takes to generate. I didn't have a name, I didn't have any results. How was I going to get cases? Like it wasn't that easy. So I knew that I wanted to be in the PI field, but before I entered PI, and a lot of people don't know this, I recognized a small little opportunity in lemon law. Okay, and here in LA County, there's one radio station that was a Persian radio AM station for the Iranian community here, and I didn't even listen to it myself. Okay, it's for the older generation, but I realized that wait a second, I think my dad or someone told me, hey, there's nobody on there advertising for Lemon. There's tons of personal injury lawyers, right, on the radio but nobody's advertising Lemon Law.
Yeah.
And you like cars, cars, you do this, that, the other. So I said, okay. So I contacted the radio station. I said, hey, how much is the advertising? And they told me for 30 days it was something like $4,500, and I'm like, well, that's actually pretty reasonable because it was
Yeah.
AM and it was blah blah blah. So I said I want to do a live show, and I decided to do a 30-minute live show that was kind of like an infomercial, and at the time it was literally I think maybe it counted for 50% of all the money that I had. I had maybe
Wow.
10 grand saved up, and I said, okay, I'm gonna roll the dice, right?
Wow.
Spend this $4,500, right? I gotta get at least one client. If I can't get one client,
Right.
I need to reassess my shit, and I need to
Yeah. Maybe you're not cut out for it.
maybe
Right.
I'm not cut out for it. But I'd rather find out now. I'd rather
Exactly.
find out now. I don't want to be
Exactly.
doing this and then figure it out three years later. So, anyways, I went on this radio station, AM station. I did this live show, and immediately on the station, and I didn't have a single employee. So, the host of the show was giving out our phone number, right, throughout the show, and nobody's there picking up the phone because I didn't even have an employee to pick up the phone. So I
Right.
had literally an answering machine picking up these calls that people were calling because it was like, they were giving out the number, which was
Yeah.
mistake number one. But learning, right? Learning, like
Yeah.
all absorbing. Like, who the hell goes and you don't have someone answering your calls? It's insane. But
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
it. Like, oh, I did it. But that was my first lesson in intake. Okay. So that
Yeah.
was the first show. And people were calling, and I'm listening to these calls on the air, and they would ask me Q&A. Hey, my car is this. I have this BMW. I have that. Blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, that's a great case. The next one. Yeah. I'm like, damn, there's like 5 good cases right now on the air. But
Wow.
obviously, I can't sign them on the air. It's like live going on.
Right.
So a couple of them called back afterwards, not even the 5. I think maybe the first one, it was like 2 or 3 that I was able to salvage, but there were 2 or 3 slam dunk, low hanging fruit, beautiful cases. Okay. I'm like, all right, I just spent $4,500. I signed up 3 cases, cost me, let's say, 2 grand a case, roughly $1,500 a case, whatever, right? I'm expected to make somewhere between 7 to 8,000 in fees on these cases at the time, right? I'm like, all right, so I spent 1,500, getting back 7. I like that return. right?
Yeah.
It's cool. So I went back again, got another three, and I went back again, and boom, boom, boom. All I For the first 6 months, that's all I did, and until I realized, holy shit, you're leaving so many cases on the table because you don't have someone in the intake room. You don't even have a
Right.
human. Get
Yeah.
somebody, an intern, a college student, anybody to
Yeah.
at least answer these calls live, so people are not calling some law firm and they're getting some voicemail. That sounds
Right.
so dumb. Who wants to get a voicemail when they're calling for a consult? You know?
Right.
That's
Especially when they're hearing you, they're excited. They're ready
yes,
to hire a lawyer. They're
absolutely.
interested. They call. Nobody picks up, and they go, you know what? Forget it. I'm done.
Totally. And so I probably lost, I don't know, 25% of the leads at that point, for months until I was able to turn some of these. I couldn't afford anybody. Literally, I spent
Right.
half of my initial budget on this airtime, of my budget meaning my entire bank account.
Yeah.
And I went, and so once I was able to turn these cases fast, because that's all I had, I would go on radio once a week, do the show, take the cases, process them by the end of the week to make sure that everything was done on all the phases so I could just redeploy so I didn't have to do it. Once I started turning some money, then I hired my first person that I hired.
So, so how long from when you started till you hiring your first employee?
My first employee was about 6 months in. Okay.
Okay.
If I could go back and if I could redo it again, I would have hired them at the month and a half mark or 2 month mark. Okay. Because I left so much on the table between that 2 months and 6 months just in intakes, right?
Mhm.
During that time that I could have recaptured with proper help and
Yeah.
backup. That I would have done it earlier, but hey, I didn't know. I was scared.
No
I couldn't
budget.
find it, and no budget. I was busy juggling. So you're always juggling. When you're solo, you're always juggling. You're constantly juggling. So it
Yeah.
feels like, you're just going up and down. But when I did hire that first person again, it was really a horrible hire. Okay. And we were talking about it before we went off air. My first employee was a serious drug addict, unfortunately. Okay.
I'm
And
sorry to laugh, but that's kind of funny. That it's
it,
funny now.
it's funny now, and I
Yeah.
felt I didn't realize it. It took me like
Yeah.
a few months. I'm like, what is going on? Some days she just wouldn't show up. I text her, call her, no response. Show up the next day with some excuse. Okay. Then I started seeing other signs, and she was really a good, sweet lady. But she was, then I realized, oh, this person has a drug problem. And no wonder she's working for $11 or $10 an hour, whatever it was I could afford at that time.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, one day she kind of just disappeared, and she didn't come back. And I'm like, damn, I hope she's okay. But it was one of those learning moments where my eyes just opened to so many things and management and this and that. But I could literally reach out. The room was so small, I could reach out and like touch her shoulder. That's how close we were sitting for
Yeah,
those
that's what I was
last.
going to ask you. I mean, you had just this little internal office that
Yeah,
barely housed you. Where did you put your employee? You brought her into the internal office?
into the internal office. Absolutely, I had put her right at the other side of the wall, so I was on one wall and she was on the other wall. And even when she left and we brought the next person in, same deal, man. We just it was just us two in that room, and we just worked cases and worked files. So once I did this 6 months of lemon law, one of the lemon clients, and this is the power of cross referrals and cross pollination within your own office, right? Even a tiny office at the time, I might have had 30, 40 active lemon law cases at most. One of the guys, I was meeting with the husband of my client, and he's like, "Oh, I have a PI case." I said, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "Yeah, I have this case." And he starts talking about his PI case. And I'm like, "Holy crap, this guy's got a $500,000 case. Like, legit." And I'm like, "Hey, man, I really want to take your case." And he had already, maybe the case was two months old, and he was sharp, the guy, the client. So he played me real good. I didn't know I was getting played, but he played me so good. He's like, "Okay, you want the PI case?" Then I realized, oh, why did he bring it up and blah blah blah. Like months later, I figured out I was
Yeah.
being played, but I didn't mind being played. He played me well, and here's how he played me. He's like, "Hey, so my wife's lemon case. Okay, I want you to do it for free, and blah blah blah, and this and that, and all these preconditions for me to give you this PI case, right? And you have to wrap up her case before you even get it, because I got to see if you're even legit. You're like some young kid. I don't
Yeah.
freaking know you. Yeah, you're smart, you're sharp, you speak well, you're a smooth talker, but I don't know. I said, fair. So I
Yeah.
made her case a priority. I wrapped it up. She was super happy, blah, blah, blah. And I took on my first PI case came from there.
Wow.
And it was from this, lemon law field and cross pollination is what I like to call it. And that case eventually a year later settled for the 500K. Okay.
Wow.
Now, throughout that time, yes, I did have a bunch. I was starting to get into PI. I had a ton of Prop 213, disputed liability, soft tissue. It was really the worst of the worst as far as legal goes, but it was the best of the best as far as the clientele would go. Because just
Hmm.
because someone has a low case or a low value case, that doesn't make them a bad person or an invaluable client. In fact, those clients are just as valuable as any other big case because they are extremely grateful because nobody else took their case.
Yeah.
Likely, they were all coming to me after they already consulted with like four different lawyers, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
fact that I even took the case was like super cool for them. And then when I would deliver at the end, nothing big, but I would deliver something,
Yeah. Right.
they would be super happy. So we
Right.
started working on all these bad reject cases. And for the first year and a half, 2 years, aside from that one case that I had for 500K, that was from the lemon law with that guy, every other case that was brought in was, very low value, horrible cases that, everybody was rejecting. And that's how we built kind of started building a client base. And for my own personal operations, I was under the kind of operating of like, hey, I'm a single guy. I don't have any responsibilities right now. I need to live on a shoestring budget, personally. So I could live off of 3 grand a month and it was cool. So any money that we made over 3,000 bucks a month for that first 2 years, the entire 100% was going back into the practice in some form, whether it was marketing or staffing or whatever for the first 2 years. And some people were like, oh, 401k and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, 401k? Let me talk to you. It's called the 401ak right here. We're
That's it.
investing in
Yeah.
ourselves. We are
Yeah.
taking that
Yeah.
money into our own, belief and kind of, responsibility. And so that just continued it to happen till today. I still operate similarly. Obviously, it's not no longer 3K a month. Doesn't
3,500 now.
Yeah,
No, I'm kidding.
35. Inflation, it's crazy. Inflation's going up.
Right.
But I still till today work under the same kind of mo, just a little bit,
Yeah.
obviously, different scale and different
Yeah.
numbers. But
Well, nothing's going to give you a better return than reinvesting in yourself
correct,
and learning new skills and growing and marketing and getting new business. There's nothing in the market that's going to get you a better return than that. But I'm glad you brought that up because I was doing the math in my head and I was going to ask you this is because if you started with approximately 10 grand, you spent 4,500 on the infomercial on the radio, as you got clients and settled cases, you reinvested back into more infomercials. And then as you started building a bit of a bankroll, you then hired somebody. And as I do the math, I'm like, hey, there's no money left for Arash Khorsandi. How long was it before you even took that 3K out of the business?
oh, at least a year and a half, easy. It
So
was
that's a year
easy.
and a half of no salary.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I was bare bones. I think for part of that time, I was still living at my parents' house, so I didn't have any rent. If not, I don't remember. Maybe most of the time I was living at my folks' house. But yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, no, zero salary for at least a year and a half, 2 years. And even then, after we started taking a quote unquote salary, the salary itself was the absolute bare minimum
Yeah.
because number one, hunger, and you got to create and continue keeping that hunger, and number two, I was always of the mindset that you need to build a war chest, in this field, the way that we were planning on growing and the way and the things that we were planning on doing. And that can't even be more true today. The market and the dynamics of the field of personal injury have changed so dramatically since 13 years ago and even from 5 years ago. So I was always of the opinion that you got to be able to kind of, accumulate a war chest
Yeah.
of sorts. So yeah, I mean, salary was not even on the list of things to,
Think
even
yeah, and
consider.
that takes discipline too, right? Just like we talk about the discipline of showing up at 8 a.m., the discipline of, hey, even though I settled a case, you talk about the case you settled for 500,000. It sounds like, that's a nice settlement, but that wasn't a nice settlement for you personally. That was a good settlement for the business. It's not like you took that money home. You still took your 3K home and put that back into your war chest. And that discipline of, hey, even if I have this big settlement, I'm not going to do anything crazy with it, is also something that you have to learn in building your business.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like, like the same way we tell our clients, hey, please don't spend this money when we give them a big check. Like, hey, structure it, do this, do that, do this. I tell clients now when I know they're not going to structure anything, I say, here, do me a favor, okay? For the first 30 days of this money, okay, just take out 10 grand and promise me that for 30 days, you're not going to touch it, okay? Do not. And, I tell them that because I want them to start at least thinking in a disciplined way when they don't want to structure their fees,
Yeah.
their stuff. But it's the same concept, man. You got to build that discipline because you need to have that ready to go for whatever you're planning on doing. Whether it's again infrastructure, systems, processes. All these things cost money, marketing, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So in 2009, for several years, you're building, you're reinvesting. Um, this is kind of a tough question, but I want to ask you,
Tell me.
what was the worst moment during that time period where you were just like, I don't know if I want to do this? Did you ever have that moment?
Yeah, I've had multiple moments like that. And one of them that sticks out, and I was telling somebody about this the other day, the same story, and I will share it with you here. I had a case that we had signed up, and it was a case involving a minor. And it was a minor where the parents were driving and they were making a left handed turn. The parents were making a left turn. And the minor suffered some head trauma and some scarring on her head. And we had the case for a little bit of time, maybe about 5, 6 months, going at it with the other party. And the guardian for the minor was the mom and or the dad, one of them. I don't know. I think it was the mom because the mom was on the car. Anyways, fast forward, we had this case. Then the unbeknownst to us, the client uh, was tempted and left our firm to somebody else for some reason. And then 5 weeks goes by, the client comes back to us, apologizing and explaining what happened that they went there. And I was like, wow, that's super shady. I was like, damn, this is crazy. I didn't even, the thought of, not good things happening, really didn't, it just didn't even cross my mind. I didn't expect people to be that.
Right.
And so this case went on, and long story short, there were a couple of instances and run-ins with this attorney, this other attorney, and this other attorney thought that he was going to bully me, and he tried to sue us. Okay, at the time, this was early on, for a bunch of nonsense and like business interruption or something like that.
Yeah.
He ended up dismissing his lawsuit within 48 hours after we had to bully him back, and he realized he's not going to get away with it. Fast
Yeah.
forward, that attorney is currently disbarred, right?
Wow.
And he's a famous name that people would
Wow.
recognize, and I'm not going to talk about it. But during that time, I was a young guy. This was all shocking to me, and it was a time where I picked up the phone and I called my dad, and I'll never forget it. And I'm like, hey, I'm done with this. I'm closing this shit up. Like, I can. This is crazy. This is not what I signed up for. I wanted to practice law, not all this other stuff. And so that was very early on in a very dark place that I was, even though it only lasted, maybe the whole thing lasted 72 hours. By the time he dismissed the case within 2 days because it was total nonsense, and he knew
Right.
he was crossing so many ethical boundaries by doing that and other things. So it was just a tactic. But the feeling and the emotion that I had during that time was still something that you know took its toll on me during that period of 3, 4, 5 days, and then thereafter, even while this thing transpired, that I was really in a really upset and angry place. And so that taught me a lot, and it really toughened my skin first and foremost, toughened the
Yeah.
shit out of my skin. So
Yeah.
that happens today. I laugh about it if someone, it's just we just go nuclear, but we also have more resources. We're also in a different phase than we were, and it also taught me nothing is permanent. Unfortunately or fortunately in life, nothing is permanent. You know, Nothing good is permanent, and the bad is also not permanent. So if you're in a bad place, something bad happens. You're in a dark place. Things are not going well. Things are stacked against you. You feel like everyone's out. You're under the gun. You feel like you're buried. Um, you just have to know it's not permanent. Okay, there will be light, but you gotta go and find the light. You gotta dig yourself to get to the light. You just cannot sit there and be inactive. You gotta move, and it's when you're moving and moving and moving, things will start to transpire. So that was a big
Yeah, I
lesson.
mean, what a scary moment. If you're early
Very.
on, you're already not paying yourself. You're not making a lot of money. Maybe you're paying yourself a little bit, depending on the timing of this. You got a decent case you're working on, and then some big name in town who at the time, nobody really believed anything that bad or shady was going on, comes after you, and you're like, what am I going to do against this behemoth of a firm?
Yeah,
And even though it only lasts a short time, you don't know it's going to last a short time when that suit comes in.
absolutely. You don't. And
You're like,
here's
am I going to be dealing with this for months? I can't afford a lawyer.
yeah,
I don't have the time or the staff to say, hey, just go file a demur or do something. Like, I got to do it myself.
Yeah. But thankfully, I did have, and this is kind of part of like Pratik, you know this better than anybody else. You gotta have good people around you, right? You gotta build your tribe, as I heard people say. That's a good one. But you gotta build your community of people, mentors, help, lawyers, non-lawyers, people that you consider to be, telling you stuff the way it really is and not sugarcoating it, right? People that actually have your best interest in mind, not haters, no jealousy, none of those people. Good people that you actually, they don't have to be in the same field anywhere. So thankfully, I was fortunate enough that I had several people in that category. One of them is Rahul Ravipudi, and Rahul was involved in this particular issue that I just
Mm,
described, and Rahul was a big part of resolving this, in a very,
wow.
very, expeditious and proper manner. And this is so many years ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's good to have people like that are good humans. Of course, he's also a great lawyer, but he's a good human.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So it's always good to have that community of people surrounding you when shit hits the fan, because you're gonna need, some sort of, at least at a minimum, some sort of crying board. You know,
Yeah, and you need a support system, right? Nobody does it alone, right? Everybody has to be the spearhead of their own success and has to be on the front lines doing the work and putting the effort and teaching themselves. But you have to be able to pick up the bat phone, so to say, and call somebody and say, "Hey, I screwed up," or "This thing happened to me," or "I did this thing. How do I fix it? How do I get back onto the right track?" Or "I made these bad decisions," whatever it may be, whether it's your fault or someone else's fault. And if you don't have anybody in the law that, if you don't have any lawyers that you have to be intentional about going out there and building that community in whatever fashion it may be. And just like we talk about making mistakes in building the practice, you'll make mistakes in building your tribe. You'll bring
yes,
people in that you think you can trust, and you'll realize that you can't. You'll think they're on the same page as you. You realize that they're not. I'm sure you've gone through that too.
absolutely. And that's why there's no ever perfecting anything, and there's no 100%. There is no 100% right or decision or whatever. For crying out loud, the divorce rate in America is close to 50%. So, and that's people in love and dove and, oh, I love you, smooch smooch, and this and that, and all that good stuff. And even then, which is the biggest decision you ever make, frankly, is your spouse or
Yeah.
your significant other. Even
Yeah.
then, your error rate is up in the high 40s.
Right.
So, you just have to realize you're never going to be perfect, and you can't be a perfectionist either. You know, being a perfectionist also prevents you from growing because you won't move fast and you won't do things because you're always
Yeah.
expecting perfection, right?
One
So,
one favorite statement I've always heard that I live by is perfect is the enemy of good
yeah,
or enemy of
100%.
done, right? Like get it done, good enough, and then fix it as you've finished that decision.
Absolutely right, man. That is so damn true. And we see it every day. We see it all the time in work and out of work, obviously, but in the practice, we see it all the time. And
Yeah.
you've got to find that happy medium, so to speak.
Yeah. So another question. You start in 2009. You're working these lemon law cases, small cases, building, building, building. When did you hit that first seven-figure case? And I know you've had a lot. That's a big moment for PI firms, right? You start your solo practice, and every person that starts their practice is like, I want a seven-figure case. That's my goal. So was that your goal? And when did you reach that goal?
It was an unstated goal because I never thought I'd actually get a seven figure case.
Yeah.
So when I first started and I was doing this and I was just kind of like going with it and trying to get cases, build the firm, build a practice, hire somebody, not be solo, at least have like two people in the office that I could talk to and not be crazy, you know, so I didn't even think I was going to get a seven figure case. So it was an unstated goal in my head, but it was so far fetched at the time that it was like, yeah, that's. And then when it was, so to answer your question, it was sometime in 2014, about 5 years in, I would say, 4.5 to 5 years in, roughly, when we got our first seven figure case and resolved it and got a successful result. And I will never forget that time. Why? Because the second we got it, and then eventually when we resolved it, because first is identifying it and getting the case, right? Then not all of them scream out at you. Yeah, there's some that scream out at you, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of seven figure cases that don't yell out at you if you don't know what
Right.
you're doing. But first, you have to get it. Then you got to take it to the finish line properly. So once we finished that case, I was like, all right, I'm done. That's it. I
Shut it
can't
down.
believe that. I'm like, all right, let's go home. This is over. Like, let's see,
Yeah.
like, I can't believe it. Like, this was it. I'm never going to get another one. And that'll be it. And blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I can't believe it. I was so happy. But it was 4.5, 5 years into uh, the system. And at that point, once I got over my, okay, we're done, let's go, and I'm like, okay, back to reality, AK. What the hell are you gonna do? You gotta continue. Great. Then I realized, okay, let's try to turn this into a systematic approach. There is a
Mm.
formula. There is it's not rocket science in terms of like we're not, NASA here. Okay,
Yeah.
we're not,
Yeah.
doing complex engineering for crazy things. There is a formula, and even in NASA, there's a formula. But here, the
Yeah.
formula is a lot easier and more straightforward, and you don't need to be a computer science or an astronaut.
Yeah.
So I really tried to then focus on the system and the process of how to repeat this, and that became the next. I would say the next 5 6 years of the practice was developing that machine, the infrastructure slash whatever you want to call it. It's not just infrastructure; it's more than that.
Right.
Developing that process to get more of these types of cases, to higher value, to seven figures, so on and so forth, while also maintaining, you know, all the other cases you have to do that
Right.
are still there.
Right.
So
You
even
can't just only work on the seven figure, two, three, seven-figure cases you may have in your office.
absolutely not, because they don't come without the others. At least in our office, in the system that we have, other places, yes, I'm sure you can. I'm talking only for me and only for us. We
Right.
have even today, 2022, when we sit here, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of very run of the mill, normal, non seven figure cases that we service and provide love and care for. And they become a foundation for our clients, our firm, future referrals, so on and so forth. And we have become a lot better at extracting value from those cases, and also, building more systems today to monetize them.
Right.
Um, a firm like us, our size or bigger, believe it or not, loses a ton of money on the small cases, dollar to dollar, pounds for pound. Okay, if you were a consultant or an analyst looking at it from an outside, the small cases, the 15Ks, the 25s, even if you get the entire policy, even if you're a soft tissue guru, okay, and blah blah blah, it's a financial loss, but it's a loss leader, right? We
Right.
have to still take them. We still take them to the finish line, and we still have to service them because it's a part of the job, and it's
Right.
part of also building the bigger picture.
So let me ask you from we asked about your worst moment. Um, and I want to flip it and I want to ask about your favorite memory of those early days of when you're growing. What was a moment when you felt like, okay, I've turned a corner and I'm going to do this?
So my first office, the executive suites that we started in 2009, was in Watt Plaza. It's Century City, large office. Everyone knows it, right? It was amazing. And then within the first 5, 6 years, during that time, 7 years, so it's up until 7 years. During that 7 year span, I expanded within that building and got another suite. First, I went from an executive office. Then once we had like 3 or 4 employees, then I went into a shared space with 3 other lawyers. So there was a business real estate guy, there was a criminal defense guy, and then there was me and some other solo. There was four of us sharing like a regular, your run of the mill normal office. And then from there, I went to another, all in the same building, okay, all in Wall Plaza in this nice Century City space, which I love. And as we added more humans to the practice and as we added more investment into it, and I'm like, wow. So basically, I'm pregnant now. This is like, I'm in this. There's no
Yeah.
turning back now, right?
Right.
Like, I am so deep in this that I don't even realize how deep I am. And,
Right.
like I was saying, you're either pregnant or you're not. There's no middle
Right.
ground.
No,
And
right.
I'm like, there's no middle ground. You're not kind of pregnant. So I'm
Right.
like, all right, AK, you're pregnant in more ways than one. All right. So I'm like, okay. So I see we were adding humans. I see what's going on. And back then, rents kept going up, rents kept going up, rents kept going up, and parking was started at $180 a person. Then the building raised it to 200 a person. Then they were, and I heard at that time, Rome so they're about to go to 225 a person. Today, that same building I think is at 260 right now per person
Wow.
today. So I'm like, oh, this is getting crazy. So my favorite and kind of my, I guess, at that early on stage moment was when I decided, I'm like, I need to get out of here and get my own place. And I knew that I wanted to have my own building, even no matter how shitty it was, and no matter how small and rinky dinky and in a bad area potentially it was. I knew that I wanted to have my own space. Okay, for so many reasons, for creativity, for workflow, a million different reasons, and also financially, it made a lot of sense because again, at the time, it was dollars and cents, parking plus rent plus
Yeah.
increase, and also signing a minimum 5 year lease. That was always scary to me. Even
Yeah.
even later on, it was scary to me. And frankly,
Yeah.
if someone comes to me today, even right now, if someone comes to me and they're like, "Hey, you got to sign a 5 year lease right now, and it's going to be $60,000 a month, right? Because that's how much space
Yeah.
you would need," I would be scared. Okay,
Yeah.
despite all the shit that I went through and like this, the thick skin, I would be scared. So, anyways, that was my wow, this was an amazing moment. Like I was so happy was when I was able to do that, accomplish that, as small and rinky dinky as it was, as a bad area that it was relative to Century City. It didn't have the pizzazz, it
Right.
didn't have the thing, and it was bigger than I could chew off at the time. But I figured it out, and that was to me really rewarding because it did allow me to have my own freedom from the landlord.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing. That's got to be a moment. I mean, then you're in. You're all in, and I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Um, one more question before we
yeah.
wrap this up, and I can let you get back to managing your 75 people.
Sure.
If you could go back to '09, 2010, and you could meet, the younger Arash Khorsandi, you're young still, but the younger one,
The younger.
and just tell him something to get through those dark days, what would you tell him?
Wow, a lot of different things actually. I would tell him to stay focused on building the process and the systems early. Invest into building that earlier on than I did, you know, whatever. And if my wife is listening, I would have told him get married to her earlier, but I'm pretty sure she's not listening. So, uh, I would have said if you're going to make it, okay. So get this concept of making it out of your head. You're going to make it. So you should now focus on not making it, but you should focus on building the right foundation and infrastructure as far as systems, protocols, and processes so that when you do quote unquote make it, right, everything is smoother and you can even you can run faster when you are in that
Right.
in that
Right.
race. You're not running with a backpack full of rocks, right? And sometimes it feels that way if your processes and your systems are not, fully efficient when you are pulling so many cases in volume and scale. Sometimes it feels like you're running with a backpack on. Okay. And that is the biggest advice I would say. And the last thing I'll kind of to add to that is people say, oh, you guys are successful, or I'll hear someone say about some other lawyer, or you say, and before we're talking with Teresa, success is not an end destination, right? Now, there is no finish line of success. Success is a daily accomplishment. You either win or lose the day, and some
Mhm.
days you lose that day, and some days you're not successful, right? But success is an ongoing, living, breathing kind of animal altogether. There is no finish line where you're like, this guy is successful. And we've seen
Right.
it. You've seen it with other lawyers, unfortunately, and other businesses. And my biggest thing is BlackBerry. When we had BlackBerry phones, and I thought
Yeah.
BlackBerry, and I love BlackBerry. And where's BlackBerry now? They're not anywhere. You
Right.
know.
Right.
So success, is every day you go out, you got to win that day. So win today, win tomorrow, and if you don't win tomorrow, just remember, there's another day right behind it. You got to win the next one.
I love that. I love that. I want to end on that. So thank you, AK, so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for listening or watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Bootstrap Solo. And remember, just because guys like Arash make it look effortless and easy, it doesn't mean that it is. And I have one ask for all you listeners and people that have been downloading the podcast. We've seen the numbers grow. Really appreciate you guys enjoying it. But our only ask of you guys, if you don't mind, is to share the podcast wherever you share stuff, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc. We can only grow if you let others know about it. So I really appreciate you guys sharing it. That way I can continue to get great guests like Arash to come on and tell us their story. Thank you guys so much and enjoy.